This episode of Pool Magazine podcast is proudly sponsored by Riverflow, whose award-winning current system is the industry-recognized preferred solution for creating a variety of exciting swim environments. From lazy rivers to sports pools, from residential to commercial, you'll find a Riverflow pump at the heart of many of today's most noteworthy pool projects. To learn more, visit us on the web at riverflowpumps.com.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Trusty, and today I'm joined by pool industry veteran Marco Perrella. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on the show, Marco.
Thank you, Joe.
Can you give our listeners a quick snapshot about your background in the pool and outdoor living industry? I mean, where did you start and how have you kind of evolved over the years?
Well, I'm going to date myself here because this started for me back in 1987. I had come out of college, studied design at UCLA, and it was general design, graphic arts, landscape, industrial, all. And came back out, went home up in Northern California, working in construction, which I'd been doing in the summertime. And my future sister-in-law was heading up to her uncle's in this kind of exclusive area of Nevada where Farrah Fawcett lived. And she said, "Hey, my uncle wants to build a pool and all that." And I'm looking at her and go, "Does he have plans? What?" And she introduced me to him, and I did a concept plan for him. And then he said, "Hey, I want you to build it." And so that was I stepped from carpentry into now the full landscape. I was designing the whole thing, and that was a huge education right out of the start. You know, I learned that you have to buy boulders. You don't just go out in the field and pick them up. Back then, we didn't have the engineering and all that we do now. We engineer our own decks. And that project that this gentleman let me kind of do what I wanted to do. And we got deep into details we made our own low voltage lights, the post of the fence, the gazebo, there was a continuity to it. What's interesting is, I know we just lost Andy Panzini, and he was a name for me because Jandy was located in my town. And we would go over to them and say, "Hey, could you do something on your automation where we don't have to cut into the walls and put all the switches for landscape lighting?" And their engineers would listen, and they started adding relays. And so so Jandy was in our hometown, and pretty neat. We would literally just go over, walk in, and ask the engineers, "Could you think about this, adding so we could control lights in the landscape on your system versus cutting into walls at people's homes?" And they would, a month later go, "Okay, we've added this, we've done this." And that was my first integration into the pool industry. At that time, I literally subbed the pool and was interviewing somebody to build it, and it turned out to be the gentleman who built my parents' pool in 1969. And at that time, he had his son-in-law underneath his wings and was teaching him, and he would go on to become my regular builder over the years as I got into landscaping and full-blown design build. And then that people would say to me, "Hey, your first job is like what most people wait 10 years for." And so that had me really worried, like, uh-oh, is it downhill from here or uphill? Where are we going? I was fortunate at some point playing softball to meet a young whippersnapper out of Cal Poly, Rob Brockman, and he was working for Howard Fields and Associates at the time. And Rob's claim to fame was he designed the Grand Wailea and then the Hard Rock in Vegas. Wow. So Rob was getting ready to step out, go on his own, and he says, "Hey, I want somebody to build my projects." And I'm like, "All right." And so all of a sudden, we're getting tossed these were high six-figure jobs back in the 90s, which was crazy. And we were kind of off and running at that point. And so I think it was in the 2000s, I was starting to get a little restless with the pool builder who I kind of felt like he was getting a little too big for his britches. But I didn't want to kill a relationship, and I had to figure out what to do. And I think finally something happened, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to go and take on pools myself, in-house. So I ran to Genesis, did my research and ran to Genesis, Morro Bay construction class. That's when I first met Randy Beard, Paulo, Skip, all of them, and started taking their classes so I'd feel more comfortable. I landed a job for a friend that was a little out of my lane for the plumbing and all that. And I remember calling Paulo and meeting him halfway, and he was a consultant to make sure my plumbing was okay. And then after that, we just kept moving more and more in the pool direction. And until we hit, say, '08, '09, when things got a little wonky. And I think that's when we downsized like crazy. I jumped into the field, and that's where I've been since then, is more focused on pools as I need far less employees than when we do our landscaping. And so that's where we kind of sit today.
Well, I know that over the years you've designed some amazing pools. Like you're part of a Tributary Revelation Group. That's a real tight network of elite designers and builders. I mean, how has that community kind of shaped the way that you approach your pool projects?
I tell you what, that's a story unto itself. That tributary group is not only is it personal friends now over, I think we're hitting 10 years, and that personal friends, the collaboration, the referrals, you have these eyes looking at you, you're looking at them. It is the most life-changing, business-changing, personal life. All these guys are friends. I mean, we were just in South Carolina. Half of them are coming out to ski with me this year. I'm going to see somebody, down in Texas. It is just a phenomenal outfit with people with no egos who are, call them geeks, whatever you want, but everybody is just wants to keep the bar, just keep raising the bar. Somewhere along the line, if you want to try something, somebody in the group has been there, done that, and you can make a phone call and, hey, what'd you use? I remember seeing this in your picture, and the knowledge and the sharing is overwhelming. It's been life changing for me.
Well, you're in Nevada. That's like prime real estate in California. I mean, beautiful natural vistas to do something extraordinary in the backyard. You do some really beautiful work there. One of your projects definitely intrigued me, which was a vanishing edge pool that you did on a hillside in the wine country of California, Sonoma County. I mean, you wrote a profile called Look Before You Leap, which really showed off your technical chops. And that's about the time you first popped up on our radar. Looking back, I mean, what did that job kind of teach you about tackling complex builds?
Wow, yeah, that was the one that opened the door for me for everything. It was a challenging project. The pool was going to be once I designed it. Well, to back into it, this homeowner was referred to me by somebody who was his go-kart tuner. And so I went and looked at what he had in his site and kind of analyzed this design he had, which had an infinity pool that you actually couldn't even see from the house. And I kind of pointed out a few things like, don't you want to see it from the house, like when you're not using it? And he said, okay, I want you to design it. And so we designed it, but it was 2 stories out of the ground. And we'd been working with Neil Anderson and Associates and said, all right, we have this one. What can you do? And so it ended up, we stacked on geofoam piers. Everything that I'd ever seen and never seen was on that. And after that, I felt like I could tackle anything, to be honest with you. It's like, okay, bring them on. I think we had $20,000 in like extra inspections just to keep track of everything. But, it's California. But that was the second largest education I ever received. And so now I love looking at projects like that, or the ones that somebody doesn't want to do, like, or they go, nope, that's out of my lane. Those are the ones that we thrive on and look forward to.
I know that you're switching gears somewhat in your career path now. I know over the past few years, you've become a real strong advocate for ozone. It's something I've seen you talking about quite a bit, but becoming a proponent for ozone wasn't really something that started in the chemistry lab, at least not with you. It stemmed more from your curiosity that developed during the pandemic, from what I understand. And you were hands-on testing it in your own pool. I mean, how did ozone first come onto your radar, and what made you curious enough to start experimenting with it yourself?
Well, yeah, it's been a crazy path actually, and I think it was about 2015 I got a call to do a pool for this world famous underwater photographer Howard Schatz, and he was moving from New York to California, had bought this lot, and he needed a pool that was for his art, a studio, with the side lights and all that. And at that point, the discussion was the water treatment had to be phenomenal because of the models were in the water for 8 hours straight and their clothes and contamination, but you couldn't have water movement, but you had to have treat the water. And so ozone came up, and I'd always heard about ozone, but never really explored it that much. And so I remember checking in with Clearwater Tech and learning a little bit about their product, how not as much how it worked, but this was the next level. This is what was the right application for this project. The project never came to be, and it kind of fizzled out at that point. I thought about it for my future clients, I don't want to say high end, but who really would wanted to go to that next step on water treatment. And so it kind of got quiet until we would see Lauren Strum from Wet Edge would come up on some of our plaster jobs, because Burkett's, our plaster, was the training grounds for Wet Edge. And so he would pop in with a group and he would see what we were doing and we'd be talking about it. He'd see our clients. He goes, you know what? I need you to meet my buddies down at Aqua Fusion in Arizona. And he goes, your clients are the perfect people for this. And, they're doing stuff with bubbles, et cetera. At that point, the word ozone wasn't brought up. It was just water treatment. So we had a tributary trip down that way, and I stayed an extra day and went over to see Mike. And the first place they took me to was, turns out to be an indoor pool for commercial for kids' lessons. And Jeremy in Noggle Paradise, he's one of our founders, Tributary, and he had done all the plumbing on it, and he had told me about it. And I walked in there, and, I didn't smell anything, and nobody was there yet. And I'm looking at this water, and I'm going, what the heck? And he's going, yep, we have this and this on it. And he's sharing me the equipment. And, I'm just all eyes. I've never seen water like this in my life, and no smell indoors. And went back to their shop and all that, got in a hot tub that they had that was being treated. And that was my introduction. At that point, the ozone came up and nanobubbles, et cetera. And so we left there, and, I'm like, wow, this could be the next step to offer my clients something like this. And then this is 2019, maybe January of 2020. And again, going back to Tributary, I'd met Harold Evans, at Renda at the time, and Harold and I would check in with each other, and I said something about the ozone, and he says, you know what, I want to introduce you to somebody who, I call her the Queen of Ozone. And he said he sent me over the contact, Beth Hamill. And so I rang Beth up because we were actually having a Tributary trip in February of 2020 to Colorado, and the topic was going to be water. And we were bringing in, Peter was coming in to talk about it, Justin from JMax, Mike from Aqua Fusion. And I started to talking to Beth, and I said, would you mind coming out and talk to our group and, teach us about ozone? And so she did. And while we're sitting there at the end of it, I said to Mike Geyer, said, okay, I want to get one of your systems. And Beth, who was a consultant for Microplasma, and they had just introduced their ozone system to residential, and I think at the pool show in 2019. I said, I want you guys talk to each other, and I want to put one of these systems on my pool. And so that's that. Literally, we left there, COVID hit 2 weeks later. I think 2 weeks after that, the units landed at my house, and I started, while we were in shutdown, replumbing my equipment room to see what this was all about. And so that was my first hands-on, let's see what's going on with ozone.
Well, what was that first experience for you like, Marco? I mean, what difference did you notice right away compared to your old setup?
So, I had a traditional setup, and actually, I think I was always messing around, had a small UV system, and I put that ozone on, and it was like the water when I walked into the swim school. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this water. So, I started using my spa, and I never used my spa. And I started using it every night because you just get in the feel of the water, the clarity. It was just another level. So it was something that at that point, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. And I started using the spa every night. I joked, I was going, hey, I'm going to go get my COVID cleanse right now in my spa and get disinfected. And that's when I decided I was all in. And so the Microplasma we were one of the early ones with them. And I started selling them on all my jobs. And that's when I decided, yeah, I wanted this to be a part of what I offer.
Well, these days you're the CSO at O3 Tech, which is a big leap from being in the field to being part of a firm that manufactures ozone systems. How did that relationship between O3 Tech start, and what about their technology impressed you as a builder?
So first, that's pretty funny. I call myself the CSO, and it actually means just something because I'm not sure my roles. So it's Chief Something Officer
Oh,
is
okay.
it's our joke. So what happened was Microplasma, bad timing for them. A great system, it was it was a step up. The output were, 5 to 10 grams, which, we'll talk about a little later, about how important that is. And but what happened with them is there was a lot of hiccups during COVID and sourcing materials and getting the bad O-rings and so on and so forth. And, I'm buying these units and we're having some issues. And Nick back in the basin was all in like I was. We're just loving this stuff, but we're kind of helping them through the hiccups and all that. And it finally got to a point where we realized that they couldn't meet what we needed, customer service wise, et cetera. And the issues as a result of COVID, they ended up shutting down and closing their shop. And that was a huge disappointment because I was so in love with Ozone and committed to it. And so Beth and I had become very tight. I mean, I talked to her 2, 3 times a week, for the last 4 years. And I was constantly crying to her because all I cared about was that I would have ozone on my future pool that we were going to build when we moved to Arizona. And she would say, it's going to be okay. So don't worry, it's going to be all right. I'm like, no, I have to have ozone. And you've told me enough about these other products out there that, I'm not comfortable. And she goes, don't worry. Well, finally, at some point, it could have been 6 months after, she just got tired of hearing me cry. She says, I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine. We've been in the industry together for 30 years. And he was with Dell when I was with Dell, and we still work together, so on and so forth. He's in the commercial side of ozone, the big stuff, but he has machines that have been out there forever that would apply to the residential and it would work good for your pool in Arizona. And so I'm going to introduce you to Joe. And I said, oh, that'd be great. And so she hooked me up with Joe. And Joe had no interest whatsoever in the residential market. When you're doing ozone systems for surf parks and huge water parks, why play around, in the little land? And a little light bulb went off in my head because I knew I still had a captured audience of my friends in Tributary who loved ozone. And so in discussing with Joe, I said, how about if I bring, your tried and true machines to the residential market? And we worked it out, and that's how O3 Tech was born. They aren't new machines. They've been around forever. We have the plasma technology. And so I said, Joe, send me one. And I put it on my pool and tried it for a while. And then because I wanted to make sure of one thing, that if I did this, that I wasn't going to end up being a tech and service center and the phone ringing all day with issues. I wanted to make sure this thing was as bulletproof as you could get, low maintenance to no maintenance, etc. So I took it off my place, gave it a thumbs up. I sent it to Nick back there, Basin Pools in Tennessee, because he's a different climate, different everything. I said, Nick, put it on your pool. Tell me what you think. And he came out all thumbs up. And that's when I said, all right, let's slowly bring O3 Tech to the pool industry, to the residential pools. And that's kind of where we started. And that was, I'm going to say, at least a couple years ago. I didn't want to jump all in. I wanted to get machines out to people I knew and get feedback, see how they worked. And so we're starting to open up more to all of this, to more people. And it's catching on very fast. A lot of people had PTSD after the microplasma. We've had to work through that. They're a little scared to jump back into the big ozone world. But we are happy to say, we have a nice list of clients who are, we have Red Rock down there in Arizona, Design Ecology. I was just out at the project that you've seen, the Big Texas project. We have a bunch of units going on that. Nick back there, Jeremy down in Arizona. Aussie Craft just started putting units on. We've teamed up with David Rockwell, who I was introduced early on to, a guru of ozone. He was doing the ozone to the stars ages ago, has worked with all the different brands and everything, and he loves our system and is taking it a step beyond what we do by adding more automation for chem dosing at night and heading towards a chlorine-free environment. So,
A lot of great endorsements there.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, many of those guys are elite builders. Rick Chafee, Nick Buckholz. I mean, a lot of these guys have been featured in Pool Magazine before. As somebody who's built and designed high-end custom pools, I mean, what do you look for in a water treatment system before you're willing to stake your reputation on it?
Well, it's as a builder, unlike some of the guys who also have their service companies, we don't. We hand it off. So our system is at the mercy of service outfits. So it has to be something that doesn't overwhelm them. And most everything outside of their lane does. So it has to be maintenance, very low maintenance. And the benefit to the homeowner on the homeowner side is like, okay, we're going to reduce your chem use. You're going to be in a pool that has no burning eyes, no green hair. You're not going to come out smelling. And so that's the way I market to my clients. I'm in, you already mentioned when, I'm in the North Bay. We're in an area where they're really health conscious. And I bet you 9 out of 10 of my pools that we design and build have our system on it. And it's the easiest sell ever. The minute you start saying, I can reduce your chemicals to virtually nothing, that's the end of the conversation. Okay, I want that. It's not as simple across the rest of the country in some markets. I'm very fortunate here. But then, as I mentioned, some of the people who are in on it, they're in some markets where people feel the same way. And so I want to make sure my clients have something that they don't look back, go, oh my gosh, that was too high maintenance. We had to do this. We had to spend this much money afterwards. And those were things that I made sure before I went all in on it that wouldn't occur. It wouldn't be like, oh, guess what? You have to send the whole unit back every year to be rebuilt. You have to do this. Oh, your service guy's going to have to learn that because nobody wants to do that. That's very rare clients who will say, okay, no worries.
Marco, you know what I think is the one big challenge with ozone? I think a lot of builders have heard of ozone, but they don't always understand what makes it worth including in their projects. From a builder's perspective, I mean, what do you see as the main advantage of ozone?
Wow. The chemical reduction, when you can have something that can take chlorine use down to a minimal, we're living in a healthier world. People are more conscious about what they're getting into, what's on their skin, etc. For me, that it's a selling point to people. Why did you build the pool? For the water, to get in the water, right? And you're going to spend how much money on the tile, which is something you look at, and versus the water, which is why you built the pool to get into. And when you have that approach, it's people open their eyes and they're like, yeah, The first question I'll ask them is, are you going to use your pool, or is it just for looks? And when they say, oh no, we're going to use this, and I said, then the water, let's give the water some love, because it really is all about the water. And so it's kind of the way we look at it.
Well, saying is you get what you pay for, but I mean, how do you position ozone to a client, say, who's on the fence or worried about upfront costs versus going with a different type of system?
The first thing you typically have to tell them is, hey, do you realize that a salt pool is actually, converting to chlorine? Oh, and so that opens their eyes right out of the chute. It's like, you still have chlorine, it's just at a more consistent release pattern versus dosing like when I was a kid, dumping it in. And so then you start, you talk about your eyes and your hair and the breathing it. Like I said, my area, they head towards the healthy side. They right out of the chute. They're not weighing, well, what's the price difference between the UV or that? We'll tell them this. Well, here's your chlorine reduction. And like I said, 9 out of 10 times, just based upon the reduction in chemicals, they're all in.
Definitely more eco-conscious, more forward thinking in the Bay Area. I mean, ozone is definitely a big part of that shift that we see towards smarter, cleaner, low maintenance pools. Do you think we'll see more adoption? Where do you see water sanitation technology heading over the next 5 years?
I think with education, we're going to see, more ozone, coming up. The thing about ozone that is so important to know is the quantity of ozone. There's systems which we call toys out there affectionately, but it's math, and you'll see, the AOP and this and that. And if you really look at it, they're dosing at, say, 500 milligrams, and that's barely enough for a spa. But due to marketing and the industry doesn't really regulate it, you can say that oh, yeah, that system is good for up to a 25,000 gallon pool. And so, what the education side is it that we need to keep pushing forward is that you need X amount of ozone to be really effective and work. And the optimum is 1 gram per 10,000 gallons, but even half of that is great. So, say we're used to seeing these small AOP units with the UV tubes and a 500 milligrams dose. Our smallest unit is 15,000 milligrams. So we have to educate the industry about effective ozone versus, oh yeah, that's ozone and it says it can go to 25,000 gallon pool. Not really, it's not really doing much to anything. And so I think as we are able to train and get people to understand that, bigger is better in ozone, we're going to start seeing more and more people go, yeah, I got it. Let's do it.
What exactly do you think O3 Tech is doing differently from the typical ozone or AOP systems builders might have heard about or used in the past?
I think partly what I just explained, about sizing, microplasma came in at the 5 to 10 gram at 2% weight. Our smallest machines are 15 and 25 grams at 5% weight. That's a big difference. There's a lot of science behind it. You could have a whole show with Beth. You could have like a whole series with Beth to educate the industry, I swear. But the big thing is that we offer is, and why I got into it with this particular unit is the maintenance schedule on it. There's a compressor that has to be done annually for, $75 part in 1 hour. Our cells are less than 15 years. We wanted to make it really simple, as low maintenance as possible, but the highest output. And so that was the only reason I was going to go for it, is if it met all the criteria. Because I'm on the retirement side and I don't want headaches. I want to stay in the industry on a positive way. And so that's, I think, what we bring to is a simplicity. It's very easy to plumb in. It's very easy to add to the system and program and then step away from and just watch it do its thing.
Well, Marco, if any builders out there that are listening to this conversation have questions about maybe getting started with ozone in their projects, what's a good way to reach out to you?
Sure. Our website is o3tech.us. My number is 415-559-5150. And we've been doing that a lot recently, some specifiers, which those are our favorite people. We were working with Design Ecology. They're working on a project for somebody up in Ohio. And we basically got on and did a Zoom with the builder, the plumber, the service tech. And we spent an hour, going through the whole system, ahead of time. And, it's pretty cool because we haven't even sent units to that job yet. And the service tech was already sending me over something for another client who's having issues with their indoor pool. He's like, hey, will you quote this for us? I think this could be the solution. So we love to educate, and we'll hook it up. And usually after about an hour with Beth, you can have like 3 unit credits at Ozone, and we'll know more than anybody. And we're happy to share that knowledge and to help anybody who wants to explore and get further into it.
Well, Marco, thanks for taking a deep dive about what you're doing these days and discussing ozone with us. Really great connecting with you today.
Thanks for having us on your podcast, Joe.
Well, that's all the time that we have left today. Make sure to like, share, follow, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast.
This episode of Pool Magazine Podcast is proudly sponsored by Riverflow, whose award-winning current system is the industry-recognized preferred solution for creating a variety of exciting swim environments. From lazy rivers to sports pools, from residential to commercial, you'll find a Riverflow pump at the heart of many of today's most noteworthy pool projects. To learn more, visit us on the web at riverflowpumps.com.